You think you know yourself. You believe you understand your motivations, your values, the reasons behind your decisions. But what if the person you think you are is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion? What if buried beneath your conscious awareness lies a version of yourself you would rather not meet? In 2002, two psychologists at the University of British Columbia published a paper that would change how we understand human darkness. Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams identified 3 distinct personality traits that, when combined, create what they called the Dark Triad: Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. These 3 traits, they argued, exist on a spectrum within every single human being, not just criminals, not just politicians, not just your difficult coworker, you. The research that followed would reveal something deeply uncomfortable. The traits associated with manipulation, exploitation, and emotional coldness are not rare aberrations. They are features of human psychology that served evolutionary purposes, traits that helped our ancestors survive, reproduce, and dominate social hierarchies. And they remain active within us today, influencing our relationships, our career choices, even the way we scroll through social media. This video will walk you through the science behind the Dark Triad. You will learn exactly what each trait means, how researchers measure them, and what the data reveals about who scores high and why. More importantly, you will have the opportunity to examine yourself through the lens of this research. By the end, you may discover that the line between good and evil is far blurrier than you ever imagined. If you have ever wondered whether you might be a little more manipulative than you would like to admit, keep watching. The answer is almost certainly yes. The only question is how much. Let us begin with the trait that most people misunderstand: narcissism. When you hear this word, you probably picture someone staring at their reflection, obsessed with their appearance, posting endless selfies. But the clinical definition is far more complex and far more insidious than mere vanity. Narcissism, as measured by psychologists, centers on grandiosity, entitlement, and a desperate need for admiration. The narcissist does not simply think they are attractive. They believe they are fundamentally superior to others. They deserve special treatment. Rules that apply to ordinary people do not apply to them. And when the world fails to recognize their greatness, they experience what researchers call narcissistic injury, a wound to the ego so painful it can trigger rage, depression, or elaborate revenge fantasies. The most widely used assessment tool is the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, developed by Robert Raskin and Howard Terry in 1988. The test presents 40 pairs of statements, and participants must choose which one describes them better. For example, you might choose between "I like to be the center of attention" and "I prefer to blend in with the crowd," or between "I am going to be a great person" and "I hope I am going to be successful." When researchers at Ohio State University administered this test to over 37,000 participants across multiple studies, they found something fascinating. Narcissism scores have been rising steadily among college students since the 1980s. Twenge, who led this research, documented a 30% increase in narcissistic traits over just 2 decades. The generation raised on participation trophies and constant praise was measurably more narcissistic than their parents. But here is where it gets complicated. Narcissism is not uniformly negative. In fact, moderate levels of narcissism correlate with leadership emergence, public speaking ability, and initial likability. A 2008 study published in the Journal of Personality found that narcissists make strong first impressions. They appear confident, charming, even charismatic. It is only over time, as relationships deepen and the narcissist's need for admiration becomes exhausting, that the facade crumbles. Think about your own behavior for a moment. When you receive criticism, how do you respond internally? Do you feel a flash of anger before you can even process the feedback? When someone else succeeds, do you feel genuinely happy for them? Or does a small voice whisper that you deserved it more? When you walk into a room, do you instinctively assess where you rank in the social hierarchy? These reactions are not signs of pathology. They are normal human responses that exist on a spectrum. The question is not whether you have narcissistic tendencies. You do. Everyone does. The question is where you fall on the continuum and whether those tendencies are helping or hurting your life. Now, let us examine the second vertex of the Dark Triad, Machiavellianism. This trait is named after Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century Italian philosopher who wrote The Prince, a treatise on political power that advised rulers to use deception, manipulation, and ruthlessness to maintain control. Better to be feared than loved, he famously wrote, if you cannot be both. Machiavellianism as a psychological construct refers to a strategic and calculating approach to social interactions. The Machiavellian views relationships as games to be won. They are skilled at reading people, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting those weaknesses for personal gain. Unlike narcissists who crave admiration, Machiavellians crave control. They do not need you to love them. They need you to be useful. The primary assessment tool is the Mach-IV scale, developed by Richard Christie and Florence Geis in 1970.
Participants rate their agreement with statements like, "Never tell anyone the real reason you did something, unless it is useful to do so," and "It is wise to flatter important people." High scorers are classified as high Machs, while low scorers are low Machs. In a landmark experiment, Christie and Geis placed high Machs and low Machs in a negotiation game where they could choose to cooperate or exploit their partners. The results were striking. High Machs consistently outperformed low Machs in competitive scenarios. They were better at lying without detection, more willing to break promises when advantageous, and showed no guilt afterward. When researchers measured physiological stress responses during deception, high Machs showed almost no autonomic arousal. They could lie as easily as they could tell the truth. But the most disturbing finding came from a follow-up study. When the game was restructured to reward cooperation, high Machs adapted instantly. They became cooperative, trustworthy, even generous, but only because the incentive structure made cooperation the winning strategy. Their morality was entirely situational. They did not have principles. They had calculations. Now, consider your own decision-making. When you help someone, do you ever calculate what you might get in return? When you apologize, is it because you genuinely feel remorse, or because apologizing is the strategically optimal move? When you share personal information with someone, do you consider how that information might be used against you later? Again, these calculations are not inherently evil. Strategic thinking is a survival skill. The ability to read social situations, anticipate others' behavior, and position yourself advantageously is correlated with career success, negotiation outcomes, and even relationship satisfaction when used ethically. The danger lies in the absence of any moral floor, the willingness to exploit without limit when the situation permits. Research published in the Journal of Business Ethics in 2016 found that Machiavellianism is overrepresented in corporate leadership. A study of 261 executives found that those scoring in the top quartile on Machiavellianism were significantly more likely to have been promoted multiple times. They were also more likely to have been involved in ethical violations, but many of those violations went undetected or unpunished. The system, it seems, rewards strategic ruthlessness more often than it punishes it. We arrive now at the darkest corner of the Dark Triad, psychopathy. This is the trait that conjures images of serial killers and criminal masterminds, but the reality is both more mundane and more unsettling than Hollywood suggests. Clinical psychopathy is characterized by shallow affect, lack of empathy, impulsivity, and antisocial behavior. The psychopath does not feel emotions the way you do. They can mimic emotional responses, they can say the right words, but the internal experience is hollow. When you feel guilt after hurting someone, your brain's anterior cingulate cortex and insula light up with activity. When a psychopath hurts someone, those regions remain dark. The hardware for remorse is simply not functioning. The gold standard assessment is the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, developed by Robert Hare in 1991. This 20-item scale is administered by trained clinicians who evaluate traits like glibness, grandiosity, pathological lying, lack of remorse, callousness, and criminal versatility. Scores range from 0 to 40, with a score of 30 or above indicating clinical psychopathy.
In the general population, approximately 1% of people meet the clinical threshold for psychopathy. But here is the crucial insight. Psychopathy, like all dark triad traits, exists on a spectrum. You do not need a score of 30 to exhibit psychopathic tendencies. Someone scoring 15 might never commit a crime, but might also never feel genuine emotional connection with another human being. A groundbreaking study conducted at King's College London used functional MRI to examine the brains of psychopaths while they viewed images of people in pain. In neurotypical subjects, the pain regions of the brain activated automatically, a phenomenon called empathic resonance. We literally feel echoes of others' suffering in our own neural circuitry. In psychopaths, this resonance was absent. They could observe suffering with the same emotional neutrality as watching paint dry. But here is where the research becomes truly fascinating. When psychopaths were explicitly instructed to try to empathize, their brain activity normalized. They could turn empathy on when they wanted to. They simply did not want to by default. This suggests that psychopathy is not a complete absence of empathic capacity, but rather a deficit in automatic empathic engagement. The psychopath must consciously choose to care. For most of us, caring is involuntary. Now examine your own empathic responses. When you see a stranger crying in public, do you feel an automatic pull of concern, or do you have to remind yourself to care? When you hear about a tragedy in a distant country, do you feel genuine sadness, or do you intellectually acknowledge that it is sad without actually feeling anything? When you watch a movie designed to make you cry, do the tears come naturally, or do you remain dry-eyed while everyone around you weeps? These questions do not have right or wrong answers. They are data points about where you fall on the empathy spectrum, and that spectrum, research shows, is far wider than most people realize. What makes the Dark Triad so powerful as a framework is not the individual traits, but their interaction. When narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy combine, they create a personality profile that is uniquely effective at social exploitation. The narcissist provides the confidence and sense of entitlement. The Machiavellian provides the strategic cunning. The psychopath provides the emotional detachment necessary to execute ruthless plans without guilt. Together, these traits form what some researchers have called the dark core of personality. In 2018, a team of psychologists from Denmark and Germany published a paper introducing the concept of the D factor, a general factor underlying all dark personality traits. Just as intelligence research has identified a general factor called G that underlies all cognitive abilities, these researchers propose that a single factor underlies all antisocial personality traits. They tested this theory across 9 different dark traits, including the Dark Triad plus sadism, spitefulness, and moral disengagement, and found strong evidence for a common core. What is this core? The researchers defined it as the tendency to maximize one's own utility at the expense of others, accompanied by beliefs that justify this behavior. In other words, the dark core is selfishness plus rationalization, the willingness to harm others for personal gain, combined with the cognitive gymnastics necessary to convince yourself that it is acceptable. The implications are profound. If dark traits share a common core, then someone high in one dark trait is likely elevated in others as well. The narcissist is probably also somewhat Machiavellian. The Machiavellian probably has reduced empathy. The psychopath probably feels entitled to special treatment. These traits cluster together because they serve the same fundamental purpose, advancing the self at others' expense. But why would evolution preserve such antisocial traits? Why are we not all cooperative and empathic by default? The answer lies in game theory. In any social system, there are 2 basic strategies: cooperate or defect. Cooperators work together, share resources, and build trust. Defectors exploit cooperators, taking more than they give. In a world of pure cooperators, a single defector would have an enormous advantage. They would reap the benefits of others' cooperation while contributing nothing. Their genes would spread. But if defectors become too common, the system collapses. There are not enough cooperators left to exploit. So evolution maintains a balance, a population with mostly cooperators and a minority of defectors. This is called a frequency-dependent equilibrium. Dark triad traits are the psychological machinery of defection, and they persist because defection is sometimes the winning strategy. A 2015 study published in Evolution and Human Behavior tested this directly. Researchers examined the mating success of men with varying levels of Dark Triad traits. The results confirmed what many suspected, but few wanted to admit. Men scoring higher on Dark Triad measures reported more sexual partners, more success in short-term mating, and more instances of mate poaching, stealing partners from existing relationships. The dark traits, it seems, are reproductively advantageous, at least in certain contexts. This does not mean dark traits are good. It means they are effective at gene propagation, which is the only metric evolution cares about. Evolution is not a moral philosopher. It is a blind optimizer that rewards whatever produces more copies of itself. If you are beginning to feel uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is a sign that you are taking this research seriously, because the next question is inevitable. How do you measure yourself against the Dark Triad?
Researchers have developed a brief assessment called the Short Dark Triad, or SD3, which measures all 3 traits with just 27 items. Let me walk you through some representative items so you can begin your self-assessment. For narcissism, consider these statements. I know that I am special because everyone keeps telling me so. I like to get acquainted with important people. I have been compared to famous people. The more you agree with statements like these, the higher your narcissism score. For Machiavellianism, it is not wise to tell your secrets. I like to use clever manipulation to get my way. Whatever it takes, you must get the important people on your side. Agreement here indicates Machiavellian tendencies. For psychopathy, people who mess with me always regret it. I will say anything to get what I want. I enjoy having sex with people I hardly know. These items tap into the impulsivity, callousness, and thrill-seeking associated with subclinical psychopathy.
As you consider your honest responses to these items, remember that the goal is not to achieve a low score. The goal is accurate self-knowledge, others as flawed. A 2019 study at Wake Forest University demonstrated this beautifully. Participants completed the Dark Triad assessment for themselves and then predicted how their close friends and family members would score. The results showed a consistent pattern. People rated themselves lower than their loved ones rated them. Your friends see your dark side more clearly than you do. This is why the Dark Triad matters beyond academic psychology. These traits affect your relationships, your career, your happiness, and your impact on others. If you are higher in narcissism than you realize, you may be exhausting your partners with your need for validation. If you are more Machiavellian than you admit, you may be eroding trust in ways you cannot see. If you have psychopathic tendencies, you may be leaving a trail of hurt people who never understood why you seemed so cold. But there is also a constructive application of this knowledge. Awareness of your dark traits allows you to manage them. The narcissist who recognizes their need for admiration can consciously practice giving credit to others. The Machiavellian who sees their manipulative patterns can choose transparency, even when it is not strategically optimal. The person with reduced empathy can deliberately practice perspective-taking exercises that strengthen their empathic muscles. Research by David Chester at Virginia Commonwealth University has shown that dark traits are not fixed. They respond to intervention. In a series of studies, participants high in Dark Triad traits were taught mindfulness techniques and empathy-building exercises. After 8 weeks, their scores on dark trait measures had decreased significantly. The brain's plasticity means that even deeply ingrained personality patterns can shift with sustained effort. This brings us to perhaps the most important finding in this entire field of research. The relationship between dark traits and life outcomes is not linear, it is curvilinear. This means that moderate levels of dark traits are often associated with better outcomes than either very low or very high levels. Consider narcissism. Very low narcissism is associated with depression, low self-esteem, and difficulty advocating for oneself. Very high narcissism is associated with relationship failure, professional setbacks, and social rejection. But moderate narcissism, a healthy confidence in one's abilities and worth, is associated with leadership success, resilience, and well-being. The same pattern holds for Machiavellianism. Very low Machiavellianism means you are easily exploited, naive about others' intentions, and ineffective in competitive environments. Very high Machiavellianism means you destroy relationships, accumulate enemies, and eventually face consequences for your manipulations. But moderate strategic thinking, the ability to read situations and position yourself wisely, is simply good social intelligence. Even psychopathy shows this pattern at the subclinical level. Very low psychopathy traits can mean excessive anxiety, paralyzing guilt, and inability to make tough decisions. Very high traits lead to criminal behavior and social dysfunction. But a moderate ability to detach emotionally, to make hard choices without being overwhelmed by feelings, is valuable in surgery, emergency response, military leadership, and executive decision-making. The researchers call this the adaptive middle, the sweet spot where dark traits provide benefits without causing destruction.
The goal is not to eliminate your dark side, but to calibrate it. So where does this leave you? You have now learned the science behind the Dark Triad. You understand what each trait measures, how they interact, and why they evolved. You have been invited to examine your own personality through this lens. The question that remains is what you will do with this knowledge. If you discovered that you are higher in dark traits than you expected, do not despair. Awareness is the first step toward change. The fact that you are watching a video about self-examination suggests you have the capacity for introspection that pure psychopaths lack. You can use this knowledge to catch yourself when narcissistic, Machiavellian, or callous impulses arise. You can choose differently. If you discovered that you are lower in dark traits, do not become complacent. Low dark traits come with their own vulnerabilities. You may be too trusting, too easily manipulated, too reluctant to advocate for yourself. Understanding the dark side of human nature protects you from those who would exploit your goodness. And if you are somewhere in the middle, congratulations! You are probably well adapted to the complex social world we inhabit. You have enough edge to compete and enough heart to connect. The key is maintaining that balance, not letting stress or success push you toward the extremes. The research on the Dark Triad ultimately teaches us something profound about human nature. We are not angels or demons. We are complex creatures shaped by millions of years of evolution, carrying within us the capacity for both extraordinary kindness and chilling cruelty. The same brain that produces love, compassion, and self-sacrifice also produces manipulation, exploitation, and indifference to suffering. The question is not whether you have a dark side. You do. We all do. The question is whether you will acknowledge it, understand it, and take responsibility for managing it. Or whether you will deny it exists and let it operate unchecked in the shadows of your unconscious. The researchers who study the Dark Triad are not trying to make you feel bad about yourself. They are trying to illuminate the full spectrum of human personality so that we can make better choices, build healthier relationships, and create a society that rewards cooperation over exploitation. If this video made you think differently about yourself, if it revealed something you had not fully acknowledged, then it has served its purpose. Share it with someone you trust and have an honest conversation about where you both fall on these spectrums. That kind of vulnerable dialogue is the antidote to the dark side of human nature. And if you want to continue exploring the science of human behavior, subscribe to this channel. We investigate the research that reveals who we really are, not who we wish we were.
The truth is sometimes uncomfortable, but it is always more useful than comfortable illusions. Thank you for watching. Now go examine your dark side. It has been waiting for you.